Good evening, everyone. It's March 20th. It's a City Council Transportation Subcommittee, and we're meeting on a couple of different things. One is the place cards for parking spaces, and one is a report from the traffic engineer regarding Lawrence Street. City Clerk, if we could take the roll call.
Chairman Laurie.
Here.
Councilor Kennedy.
Here.
Councilor Madonza.
Here.
3 present.
Thank you. I'd also like to just say who's in attendance tonight. Etta Manchek, Kendra Amaral, Eric Engel, the city traffic engineer, Henry Marchand, and Adam Bakey, the head of DPD. And also we have councilors Rita Mercia here and Resna Noon. With that, if there's no objection, why don't we start with the Lawrence Street, the traffic engineer's report regarding Lawrence Street?
I presented my findings on Lawrence Street previously at another meeting, but this time I'd like to make my recommendations as to the winter parking. That was a concern there of having a ban on all streets or major arteries during the wintertime from December 1st to the end of March. And what I've done is I've looked at other cities comparable in size and characteristics to Lowell and to see what they do in the wintertime. And many of them have now gone to just a declared snow emergency situation. When there actually is snow, then they declare an emergency. And they're able to get the word out through emails and texts, Twitter, phone, websites, internet. You know, there's many ways of getting the word out to people now when a ban is declared. And a lot of cities where they have narrow streets and a lot of on-street parking demand have gone this route and been successful with it. Okay. So that's what my thought was, that we could try this here in Lowell. You know, we have time between now and next winter to put something like this into effect and to see how that would work, because obviously there's a great need for on-street parking in Lowell, and when you have a winter like this with no snow, it would be much more convenient to the residents and businesses to keep the parking on the street.
I agree. I agree with you 100%. And I forget if it was you or it was Adam Bakey who said at the last meeting that some of these regulations are so old, it was before we could forecast snow. And they had these emergency routes for that matter. Any other councilors want to speak on the matter? Councilman Donker?
Yes, I mean, I agree with the recommendations. We certainly have come a long way in weather forecasting and just communication in general, that we probably can just do us on a declared snow emergency basis. Would it be your recommendation to do this all for next winter, or should there be a phased approach of reducing the number of snow emergency routes?
I would think the best route would be to put it into effect for next winter, because right now the snow ban is only effective on the major arteries in the city, not every street. So it would be just changing the rules on those streets for next year. It wouldn't. The rest of the streets would have always allowed parking all winter, and they would still continue that way.
Yeah, I was only referring to the snow emergency routes. Yes. Any other questions? Well, I'll make a motion to recommend to the full council that we proceed with the traffic engineer's recommendation.
You have a second?
Second.
Roll call?
Chairman Laurie.
Yes.
Councilor Kennedy.
Yes.
Councilor Madonza.
Yes.
3 yeas.
Just one question. That snow ban ended on March 1st anyway, right? Oh, it's the 31st.
March 31st. We still have another week to go. So
Okay.
who knows? It might get snow next week, right?
Any problems? Anyone from the public want to speak? No. Okay. We'll move on to the next part of the meeting, which is the parking spaces. This concerns the little cards in front of the homes that say no parking reserved for the owners. And there's been some controversy over the past few months, and we'd just like to, if any council wants to. Nope. We're just going to hear from Adam Bakey from the Department of Planning and Development. Thank you.
Okay, good evening. At the last meeting of this subcommittee, I believe it was Councilor Kennedy requested, and the subcommittee collectively voted to have DPD just take a look at where the placard demand actually is in the city, and if there are areas where the demand is less, and whether that would tell us anything about whether the same policy should be applied citywide or not. And we did have the opportunity, thank you for giving us a few weeks, and we did have the opportunity to do that exercise. The result was provided to you in your packets, and we have for those who don't receive a city council packet, we have a board up here that I apologize is a little hard to read from too far away, but the what appear to be basically green dot symbols on the map represent every location that we have a record of having obtained a parking placard since 1997. It is certainly likely that there are some out there that were obtained before 1997, but the records that were being kept in the building department at the time, we don't, if they were being kept, we don't have them anymore, so we don't have access to those. However, this does give us still a pretty large number of placards to work from. It's several thousand, and it does, I think, give us a good indication of the areas of the city where there are concentrations of placards and areas of the city where there are less concentrations of placards. And we looked at it, sort of overlaying it with a number of different considerations from neighborhood boundaries to census tracts and things like that. But not terribly surprisingly, it actually aligns, the relative demand aligns very closely with zoning districts. And given those who will recall from when the city council changed the zoning in the city back in 2004, one of the objectives was to actually write zoning that was reflective of neighborhood character. So it is not surprising that the zoning districts align with different sort of characteristics of the neighborhoods in which they're located. And it is also similarly not terribly surprising that there are certain types of neighborhoods where the demand for these types of placards would be greater than others. There are generally the neighborhoods where there is a greater concentration of housing units relative to off-street parking, not surprisingly, are places where the on-street parking demand is higher, and therefore more people have made an attempt to preserve their own space in front of their homes using this system. The results of, if we actually extrapolate or look at the actual data that's displayed on this map a little more carefully, you'll find that the urban and traditional zoning districts, whether they be multifamily, single-family, or two-family, all generally have much higher demand for the placards than any other portion of the city. In the urban single-family district, 66% of the parcels actually have obtained a placard. And it goes down to, in the urban mixed-use district, only 10%. But the mixed-use districts also allow commercial uses as well as residential, which would be some of those parcels, which would explain why those numbers are slightly smaller than the surrounding residential areas. And certainly the residential uses in those districts would have the same needs that they do in the exclusively residential districts of similar character. In contrast, in the suburban districts, the suburban multifamily, the suburban mixed use, and the suburban single family, despite having over 6,000 parcels that have that zoning designation, there are a total of 93 with placards. And you'll see, if you look closely at the map, that those placards sort of fall into two categories. There are a number that are just sort of scattered as a single placard in a block that odds are there's some unique circumstance around that particular property, why that property owner chose to obtain one. Or about half of them fall into these little clusters where on a single block, almost everyone has one, which points to either some condition on that block that's unusual, or perhaps some dispute among neighbors over how to allocate the parking that they have resolved in some manner using the placard system. The other set of zoning districts we have in the city are the commercial and industrial districts, as well as the sort of special purpose districts like the institutional district. And not surprisingly, there are very few placards in those areas because there are very few residences in those areas. There are a few, particularly in the neighborhood business districts where there are some residential uses above commercial uses, and in the institutional district, which is generally the land proximate to the university campuses, and in some cases does include some residential properties. If you take those two out, there really are almost no placards in any of the commercial or industrial areas of the city. So ultimately, I believe this is the type of information that I think the council was looking for in trying to evaluate how to proceed with this program. I did put in the report that we provided to the council that while a pretty elaborate restructuring of the system was proposed back in January, and we certainly have the sense that the council may feel that was a little bit more than is necessary at this time. We did identify 3 pieces of that we would recommend incorporating in some manner if the council wishes to make any changes to the system. I don't believe the changes would be dramatic for any of the participants, but it would make the program a lot easier to enforce, and it'll make it a lot clearer what parking is actually being reserved, which I think is fundamentally part of what sometimes yields conflict and challenges with respect to this. And if you'd like, I can go through what those are, either now or in the subsequent discussion. The first is just that the ordinance at the moment refers only to a space in front of the dwelling, with no clarity as to where it begins or ends or how big it is or anything, and we would propose that it be at least, if an ordinance change does go forward, that we at least clarify that the reserved space is 20 feet long and that it is somehow related to the placard location. We're proposing that it be centered on the placard, which appears to be the basic practice for most people who use these placards, so that would be the minimum amount of change for anyone. We also just wanted to identify a number of provisions that I think are important in terms of just reinforcing existing rules around parking to help people realize that the placard doesn't allow them to break other traffic and parking laws, like the distance that you have to park away from a hydrant or the distance that you have to park away from a street corner or something like that, and specifying that if your property doesn't have the 20 feet of frontage that is necessary for a parallel parking space, then you really, it's difficult for you to reserve 20 feet in front of your home, so that property wouldn't be eligible. And then just some clarifying language with respect to where the placards must be securely affixed and that they must be in a location that's actually visible to motorists from the public way. It should go without saying, but you'd be surprised. Apparently there are some that appear and disappear at the convenience of the property owner. It would, I think, be better with respect to enforcement and clarity for people who are trying to follow the rules and abide by people's reservations if people follow that. Those are the 3 pieces of the larger proposal that I think would really be very helpful, but would not have a dramatic effect on anybody's current practice, other than, again, to make things clearer and more enforceable should a dispute arise.
Thank you. Any questions from the councils? Councilor Mercia.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Through you to Adam Beggy. Has anything changed from the time that it came before us in the first place to the time that we're here right now?
Changed in what sense?
In any wording or anything? Since we brought this up one time before and it was referred to the Transportation Subcommittee, from that point on, has anything changed in there?
Well, there is no, well, I guess perhaps technically the ordinance was referred to this committee, but the committee has not taken any action on it. There is no alternate ordinance that has actually been formally proposed at this time. I'm sensing from the prior discussion, both at the full council and the meeting in February, that the subcommittee is looking for something a little bit different, and I'm proposing that if you are looking for something a little bit different, these are some of the core pieces of the prior proposal that would be good to preserve. But at the moment, I believe the original ordinance is still technically before the subcommittee.
I don't mean the original one. I mean the one that was presented after the fact, after Councilor Caulfield and myself and were you on the, I don't remember, probably Councilor Broderick. The 3 of us were on that. So when we brought it to your attention and you retooled it, yep. Has anything changed from that point?
No, that is the version. That was the January version of the ordinance. Well, it was submitted in December, and the public hearing was in January. That is the version of the ordinance that was referred to the subcommittee, and technically is still before the subcommittee. again, my impression from the prior conversations is that the subcommittee may be looking for some alternatives to that.
Oh,
but
you
there
want
are
to
none
add something
published
on
yet.
it? You want to add something to it?
No, I almost had the opinion before, if it's not broke, don't fix it. There weren't a whole lot of complaints that I had heard, in a few areas that were. And I'm looking at what's being referred to us tonight. If you do get a placket, the ordinance change would say you only get 20 feet.
It defines it much better.
Right.
And Councilor Mendonça was at every meeting as well, so that I thought back then that Adam Bakey and those that retooled it reinforced it,
Right.
redefined it to make it stronger, to be able for the police to enforce it better.
Right.
To get more details as to, we're not slapping a placard up, we're going to tell you what size of a vehicle or whatever space is required with that. So at that time, I had no problem with accepting it. So to have it referred here, it only strengthens my belief that you did a great job, and so I supported that. But if you think you want to add to it or, retool it, then I didn't.
Actually, what it appears is what's coming before us now is defining exactly what you get with one of those parking space place cards, making it a little bit easier for the police to enforce it.
Well, I thought that's what they did already with this.
Well, I think when you looked at the old, and I don't have a copy in front of me, what actually is on the books now, it's very hard to enforce. And I think what they're coming back with now is they're actually going to define a space as 20 feet.
Well, they did that in January.
But that didn't pass. It came back here.
I don't know why.
Yeah, well,
That's why I just asked him, did you retool it further? And he said no.
Yeah,
well,
but
excuse me, go ahead.
if I may, Counselor, what I understand happened in January, there was a full ordinance that was before you, and it was for really a comprehensive new system that would, I think, address all of the enforcement challenges around the existing system, but it would result in a significant change for people. It would have had a new sticker system that went with the placards. It would have required a new type of sign to be issued to everyone. And I think there was some sense from the council at the time that that may have been more than what was the general will of the council to change at the time. So it was referred back here to figure out which pieces were really important, if
Okay,
any,
which are taken out.
and
I
which
see.
might not be necessary.
Okay.
And I think that's
There
where
you-
we are. We're trying to figure
There
that
you
out
are,
here. So.
okay.
Councilor Kennedy.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. My recollection of how we got here was that when the matter was before the full council, there were people who spoke from the Christian Hill area who were upset that their area was even included, that you could even get one there. And it was their sense that there were some areas of the city and that they lived in one where you didn't need the ordinance. And I think that part of the exercise of looking at the map and seeing where everything was to take a look at whether or not we could identify areas of the city, probably single-family areas, but areas of the city where you don't really need the placard, the signs up. Were you able to identify any areas like that, or what is your recommendation along that way? And before you answer, let me just, my position would be that, I've heard when it was before the full council that that some councilors were making the point that if anybody's entitled to it, then everybody should be entitled to it. My position would be that everybody's entitled to park in front of their house, or in front of anybody else's house for that matter, unless there's a placard there. So I don't feel that by not having placards in some areas, that you're denying anybody any rights. But anyways, with that said, do you want to respond?
Sure. I guess, first of all, I think on some fundamental level, I think I very much agree with you, Counselor, that the public way is is public, and therefore it is available to, say, at least to some degree, to everyone. And I think what this system has done over time is it has actually enabled people to take quasi-private ownership of a section of what is essentially the public way. And I think that was clearly the wish of the council in 1989 or so when the ordinance was first passed, and several thousand people have taken advantage of that. And I think you'd have several thousand people who would be very disappointed if we eliminated it altogether today. That said, I think what this map tells us is that there are definitely areas where people, for a variety of reasons, feel the need to make a formal reservation of that space in front of their house. And there are other areas of the city where people generally have the ability to park in front of their house, whether they have a placard or not, and feel no such need to formally reserve it. I think clearly that, again, the suburban zoning districts of the city, the majority of that area is zoned suburban single family, but there also are suburban multifamily areas and suburban mixed use areas where there really are very few, less than 2% of the properties have taken advantage of this program. Those are obviously the places where the demand is the least high. It's important to realize that even in those cases, you do have 93 households that would be disappointed if the program were ended for them. But I think that is essentially what the folks from Christian Hill were asking us for. At least, I believe one of their homes falls into one of those areas. I think the other one's home falls into an area where the zoning district in general, in other parts of the city, has a lot of demand. So it would be, I think, a real challenge to eliminate placards from that zoning district. While it might not be such a challenge in that particular block of Christian Hill, other areas of that same zone, as well as that zone in other parts of the city, you have a lot of demand for this program, and I think there would be a lot of consternation if you went ahead and did that. But ultimately, it's really the will of the council, based on the information we've provided and any other information you'd like us to help put together for you, to ultimately recommend whether you feel there are areas where it should not apply. We had previously proposed that it probably should not apply in the commercial and industrial districts of the city. Even if there are the occasional home in those areas, the priority in those areas of any public resource really should be in supporting the needs of the businesses that are in those areas, and reserving a portion of the public parking in an area that otherwise, where there might be business demand for that parking for a residential use that is really not the priority of those areas. I think that is something that if we were to make a recommendation, if you were to decide to exclude certain areas, I think the first one we would suggest is that you, again, put the priority in the commercial and industrial districts on the commercial and industrial property owners. And that would be the first place I would look if you were going to exclude some parts of the city.
Mr. Chairman?
Sure.
If I could,
Councilor Kennedy.
I would almost make a motion to exempt the single-family districts from the ordinance altogether, but I'm hesitant to do that without knowing where the 93 locations are. And I'm assuming that since you were able to compile this list, you have the memorandum that you have a list of where those 93 are?
We do indeed, and it's one important sort of semantic point of clarity is that we are referring to the suburban zoning districts. We actually have single-family zoning districts at all three levels of development intensity. And the urban single-family and the traditional single-family are areas where there's actually a lot of demand for these placards. So I assume that you meant the suburban.
I misspoke.
Okay.
I meant the three, the SMF, the SMU, and the SSF, right? That's, okay.
Yes, great. And to answer your question, the map that is provided here, as well as the smaller version that you have in front of you, the green dots are the actual locations of the placards that, again, have been issued since 1997. So we do have addresses that correspond to all the points of all the data on this map. We could provide an address list if that's useful to you, and if that's in any way more helpful than the map form. But you can see
The
them.
green dots are pretty small on my map, so
Yeah.
it would be good to
appreciate
have that information.
Yep.
I think so.
Councilor Mendonça.
Well, I agree with the analysis that was done. And there's really not that many in the suburban districts, so prohibiting them there really doesn't gain us much. And I'm of the opinion that if we have it available as a right to all property owners, residential in particular, or that we have it for none. That would be the equal thing to do. In that sense, though, I think moving forward, I would agree with doing the incremental approach, which would be, as recommended here, to properly define where the space is and how big it is, et cetera. And beyond that, I would actually support having an annual renewal of this at an appropriate fee, because we don't know how many of these have been put up and have been gone. All we know is that somebody came down, asked for one, paid the fee, and took it. Years later, they might have sold the house, the fence may have disappeared, and the sign is no longer anywhere that we know of. The annual renewal would allow us to keep track of which ones are current.
Yep.
So we don't know of these, how many are still current. And if they were issued before 1997, they might be out there and we don't know about it.
Yep.
So I would start with the 3 recommendations here, and then consider also separately a fee and renewal structure that might be appropriate to keep better track of this. I'm also hoping that by having an annual renewal with the fee, that those people in areas that don't really need them are not going to spend the money for something they don't need. And in some cases, some of the areas that are being complained about, are they going to pay a fee for something they may use once a year? Maybe not. That may or may not address the problem, but I think it'll be a step in the direction of addressing it. So I'll make a motion to prepare changes to the ordinance addressing these 3 points, and if others wish, also a fee structure. But they should probably be taken up separately so that we can do it in a la carte fashion in case there's a majority that wants to do this but not the fee. If there is a majority to do both, I think that would be great. So I'll make a motion to proceed with change to the ordinance involving these 3 recommendations.
I'll second that.
Can we have a roll call for the first 3?
Chairman Laurie,
Yes.
Council Kennedy,
Yes?
Council Mendonça.
Yes.
3 yeas.
Now on a motion by Councilor Mendonça for an annual fee.
Yeah, that there be an annual renewal for these placards and an appropriate fee to be determined.
Mr. Chairman?
Yep.
The logistics of that would be, I'm not sure how that would work. I don't know, what's the fee structure right now? Is it $10 one time?
$10 in 1997, and you still got it.
Okay. So it's $10 for one time, but if we make it be an annual fee, $10 a year, how are we gonna enforce that? I mean, if I got one of these, and I got it this year, why am I paying the $10? No, who's gonna chase me for the extra 10? And it's not gonna expire. I could probably leave it, in front of my house 5 or 10 years, before anybody comes up to me and tells me I owe $90. So how would we enforce that? How would that happen? Unless the expiration date was put on the card.
Yeah, we'd have to look at, there are a number of different approaches one could take to that, from some kind of, similar to an auto registration, some kind of sticker that's placed on the placard on an annual basis, or we could charge a fee that's sufficient enough to reissue placards every year, and you get a red placard this year, and a blue placard next year, and a green placard the year after, and the red placards are no longer valid this year. We'd have to look, if it's the will of the council to explore that, we would be happy to explore that and see what would be the best system. I think you're correct that some of the people who would potentially obtain them might do their best to avoid paying that renewal fee and see if they could continue to just keep it up there and see if it works for a while. That would probably happen some.
It's probably going to work if it's the wrong color, actually.
Councilor Mendonça.
Well, the way, just to Councilor Kennedy's point, the way it's enforced now is the person who has the permit has to calls the police and has to show them their permit. And on that permit, in order for it to be current, would have to have, well, going forward, would have to have some dates on them. And it would have to, then it would show it be current. That's the current system. They simply have to have the permit. In the future, we could say yes, but it also has to be current because the active dates of the permit would have to be current as well. And so, but that's always checked by the officer at the time they're called out. They have to produce the permit.
Okay, Mr. Chairman, that's fine, but that's for in instances where there's a violation. But you could leave the card out in front of your house, have it be expired for several years, and nobody parks there because they see the sign, which is what's supposed to happen. So you wouldn't catch up to them until somebody violated their space, and then you caught, right? So the system in place right now really isn't, it's not perfect. Not that I can come up with a perfect one, but that's kind of a problem. The fee is another thing. I'm not so sure that I think that it's a good idea to just to have the fee be annual. I'm not so much in favor of that, but I'd wait and see on that. Have you got something to? You want to weigh in on this?
We're just brainstorming here, trying to figure out.
No, I had a question. The cost of the sign itself, it used to be $10. The cost to us to make the sign and do the administrative work, is it more than $10 now?
It's difficult to quantify for sure, but probably the total package of work associated with it is more than $10. There's a number of fees that haven't been adjusted in a long, long time that probably don't pay for everything they used to pay for.
No, I don't know if to me, a fee is just another fee. I don't want to see another fee on the people in the city. But if we could charge, because it is lifetime, basically for the term of the house, $20, $25, I wouldn't mind that, because I'm looking at the cost of the sign and the administrative cost to the city, our cost. I think we're doing the person who lives in the city a favor, saying, you can reserve a spot. I think we're doing good there. But, if we don't want to do it at a loss, if it's going to cost us $25 or so to raise the rate, I could go with that. Councilor Mendonça?
Just a comment. I mean, I'd be the last one to say have more fees or higher fees. But this is a case where the person that gets a placard is receiving something for the use of that placard. And it's entirely voluntary on their part. So if they want to have this right enforced, they'll be paying for that right. But it's not a fee that everyone has to pay. So in a sense, we're not imposing a fee on everyone that they have to pay. This is just the people that want to have the right to reserve the space that would normally be for use by everyone who lives in the city.
Well,
Okay, Councilor.
I think, have we reached the point where we're going to be asking the Division of Planning and Development to look at the color system on the placards? And if that's where we are, what I would do, I'd make a motion that we refer the color system to the Division of Planning and Development for their recommendation, as well as their recommendation on the fees. And also, if they could provide, if the Division of Planning and Development could provide a list of the locations for the placards that are in the suburban areas. You know, and I understand that there's, you know, there are some people in the suburban areas, and the reason I'm asking for the list is because there might be a real good reason why there should be placards there. But the reason that this is before this subcommittee is because there were people on Christian Hill that bothered to come down here to speak that feel like they don't need it in their area. So I'd at least like to take a look at that and have a good answer for those people that came down here when this ordinance was first presented to the city council. So I make that as a motion.
Okay, we did have a motion on the
Well,
table.
actually, no, it wasn't seconded, so it's all right.
Okay,
Yeah,
that
but
I
I'll
was just gonna
second
say.
Council Kennedy's, because it's inclusive of what I wanted to do. We'll look at the fee structure. In addition to that, we'll look at the possible colors of placards. But to me, that would imply that every time it's renewed, they have to put up a new placard. So it'd be a slightly different system, but we'll take a look at the logistics of it and see what happens.
And a fee structure and a color for the placards. Yeah. Okay. So we do have a motion for the list of locations in the suburban areas of who has the signs, and a fee structure, and color for the placards. Is that by year?
Yeah.
By year.
Basis, that was.
Annual. Okay, can we have a roll call?
Chairman Laurie,
Yes?
Counsel Kennedy,
Yes.
Counsel Madonza,
Yes.
3 yeas.
Thank you. I can live with that. That can go to the full council for a vote, up or down, whether they want to go with the fee structure or not, and that way the full council will get a vote on it. Any other questions from any of the councilors? Or?
No, but we're going to have a subsequent meeting, the subcommittee is? Is that your
We
intention?
can come back. We can come back. For the fee structure?
Well, I think we were asked to provide, for clarity, we were asked to provide a recommendation basically for some kind of annual renewal system, color-based or whatever it may
Right.
be, associated fee structure, and that you wanted the list of the area, the addresses in the suburban areas that would be
Right.
impacted if you were to choose to make a change. So I presume that that means once you review that material, you will then advise us in the law department what you would like with respect to an ordinance. So I don't
Right.
think we can go right to the full council with that quite yet.
If you could send or email me that list, that would be, I'd appreciate that.
Yeah, we could. Again, what you came back with is really great compared, you know, and I thought we gave you enough time. We gave you over a month. How much time would you wish for this, Mr. Bakey?
Well, I don't think we need another month for this piece. It's really a matter of when you can find a Tuesday night that you'd like to do this. I don't know what other subcommittees are scheduled, but
Mr. Chairman, next week we have I think it's next week, we have the special meeting with the city manager. It might be.
Right.
That might be a good time to do it, unless unless you need 2 weeks.
I'd prefer to have at least 2 weeks. If we
2
could.
weeks.
Oh, yeah, that's fine.
We don't need the full month, but if we could have at least 2, that would be great.
Yeah, what you came back with this time was great, so I would just assume you take the time and look at it and so 2 weeks? Is it open?
Don't know offhand, April 3rd. I believe it might be open.
Okay. We'll have the city clerk look, and if it's available, we'll be back April 3rd.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, I think if this is taken for April 3rd, we could always meet
Yeah, you can go on the
someplace
message.
else. We just wouldn't be on TV, would be okay.
Don't have to busy the makeup crews first?
Okay.
Unless there's something else, I'll move to recess.
Second.
Well, but before we do have one more thing on the item. It's not on the item tonight. We're going to have to sit down. It was referred to the Transportation Subcommittee was the bridge, the university bridge, what we're going to do with that. The university no longer wants it, so with the cost structure, it doesn't look good for the bridge, but it was referred to the subcommittee. Would anyone like to speak on? Well, it's not on.
It's not on the agenda.
It's not on the agenda. We can't speak on it tonight. But we do have that on the table down the line, and
We
that's
could
sometime.
post that as part of the agenda for
You wish,
after the recess. On the next notice, we'll add the University Ave Bridge.
Yeah. Oh, you can come on up and speak, please.
Good evening,
Get your name and address.
Bill Daly, Floyd Street.
Yeah.
I agree with everything you said, but I was just wondering, the last time we were here, it was supposed to be part of the parking ordinance too, about the one-way streets, about having residential stickers. That's why I was wondering, you know, if that was on the agenda, because it was all part of this package, that's why I was wondering.
Right. Was anything done for those areas?
There was some discussion at some of the earlier subcommittee meetings where there was discussion of the placards about some of the unique circumstances on a few of the short, narrow streets in the city. There was some talk of one-way streets as well. I know Eric did take a look at a couple of those particular cases. It's not, it is not clear to us that there is a blanket solution that would be fair and appropriate to apply to all one-way streets in the city, or all narrower streets in the city, or all streets in the city that only have parking on one side. You may create some winners, but you will definitely create a lot of folks who will feel aggrieved by just about any solution we were able to come up with if you try to approach it on a blanket basis. But on a case-by-case basis, over the years, we have been able to come up with some modest improvements in some of these areas. Others of these areas, the challenges just are, you know, physical in nature, and there are not a lot of solutions we can do with any kind of ordinance or legislative solution. But I'll let Eric weigh in if he has anything to add to any of these particular properties that he has taken a look at.
Yeah, I looked at some, I think West Burnside was one of them, and some streets in Back Central. But it's, like Adam said, it's tough to come up with a solution that addresses their particular problems. If you go to a residential sticker or one side of the street or another, it's not an equitable solution, and it can create more problems than you're trying to solve. We haven't been able to come up with a solution that would affect the particular problem.
Okay.
So that's my concern, because we were talking about, especially, a one-way street, and then you have the placards. If everybody on the other side puts a placard up, people on the other side of the street have no place to park.
Right, right.
So I would like to see the Transportation Committee come up with something, because, Back Central Street, they did at one time have that, then they did away with it. But I mean, I think, like you said, there should be exceptions for certain things, like it was said, maybe one residential sticker per household.
Right.
We need a little relief. The people who park on one side have no place to park. If, everyone puts up a placard on the other side, we pay our taxes too. We'd like to have a place to park.
Right.
So, I'd like to see this committee, do something for us.
Councilman Donza?
Yeah, I agree. I appreciate that you reminded us. I was thinking before the meeting about the situation, not so much on one-way streets, but on streets where parking is prohibited on one side. Most of them maybe are one-way street. But the fact that it's prohibited on one side means that one side can get the placards and the other side cannot.
Right.
And that becomes unfair, because now not only can they get the placards on the one side, the neighbors across the street are the ones that don't have any place to park. So that is probably something to explore. I don't know if that's something we could put in the ordinance, that in the case of where there's no parking on one side, we can't have reserved spaces on either side. I don't know if there's a way to do that, or as it was suggested, if we make it, rather than an area where we could have placards, that have it a residential parking area, so everyone as a resident can park on that area, in that zone. And therefore, there wouldn't be reserved parking spaces per se, just that all residents would have an equal opportunity to park on the street.
Something would, some help for, somewhere, because like I said, if everyone on the other side had a placard,
Right.
Yeah, it's certainly unfair if one side of the street is no parking and they have no opportunity to get a reserved parking space at all.
right. I appreciate it, thank you.
Okay.
Yeah, we talked about that last time, and I don't know if it was feasible. I think there was some thought of a parking sticker for the street, but then you're getting into neighborhood parking like they do in Cambridge, and do you do it for one street and not the others? And
I think it would be administratively extraordinarily cumbersome to have, the Floyd Street sticker parking program and the North Street sticker parking
Right,
program and
right.
so forth. But it is, I think it would not be difficult to implement or difficult to, write a law that said, a change to the ordinance that said if you are on a street where parking is prohibited on one side, the placard system is not available to you. However, you will almost certainly find that there are a lot of people who have placards on that side where parking is allowed, who are going to be as disappointed by that proposal as the folks who presently are on the side where parking is not allowed are disappointed by the status quo. And it's really up to the city council which you perceive to be more fair. And it's not hard to put the ordinance together to allow you to do either one. But it's really, we would need your direction as to which way to go on that.
Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, I would think that it would probably be as easy to exempt one-way streets or streets that have parking on one side as it would be to exempt suburban neighborhoods.
Yeah.
And maybe what we need, and again, I haven't looked at the suburban list, but maybe what we need is a mechanism for people to a mechanism where people can go and ask for special consideration. If you have a handicapped person or something like that, some type of situation like that, then maybe there needs to be special situations. And so maybe something like that could be put into the ordinance.
Well, the handicapped spaces are available, and that supersedes the placard system anyway. That we don't need a new ordinance or a new program for that. Almost every council meeting, at least one handicapped parking spot is designated somewhere, and that's available as a resource for anyone who needs, for reasons of an approved designated handicap that entitles you to a handicap plate or a handicapped tag hanging from your mirror, you're eligible to have a handicapped parking space installed to serve your needs, regardless of the placard system or anything we do with that. So that would definitely be available, Counselor.
Okay.
make a motion to send that to?
To put that on for the third?
Yeah.
Sure.
Okay, we have a motion to put the one-way street, no parking for the placards to be looked at. Can we have a roll call on that?
Chairman Laurie,
Yes.
Counsel Kennedy?
Yes.
Counsel Madonza?
Yes.
So what I see is 6 recommendations going back to DPD to be looked at, to come back to the full council, or to come back in 2 weeks for recommendations to the council. I apologize for my speech tonight. I'm battling a cold, so I'm having a hard time hearing and speaking.
Just a question to the chair.
Sure.
The 3 recommendations, could we go ahead and proceed with that as a recommendation to the full council? And the rest could come back to the subcommittee?
Sure, do them when you want these
Yes,
presented.
if my colleague's in agreement.
Well, why not just, what is the point, if we're gonna have to wait before we vote on the ordinance anyways, why not just wait the 2 weeks and then come back with a full package rather than just, piecemeal? I mean, it doesn't make a difference, but I guess I think that I don't see the problem with waiting the 2 weeks.
Okay, that's fine.
The first 3, I think the DPD came back with, were actually great, but it's more for enforcing. It makes it easier to enforce the code. But if it's the wish, we'll wait. Any other issues? We have a motion to adjourn?
Move we recess until the
2
3rd
weeks,
of
yeah.
April at 5:30?
Yep.
So moved.
Thank you. We're in recess till April 3rd.